A special thanks to Alex Dodens for his beautiful rendition of Where Is My Mind by Maxence Krisen. The theme of today's assembly is road safety. The Friends School Road Safety Taskforce was formed at the end of June this year in response to the need for better traffic management around Boa Vista and Argyle Street, and also some of the road accident issues that have occurred in the recent past. The group is composed of Climie students, Friends staff, teaching or non-teaching, and community representatives. We have many initiatives planned to improve our road safety culture. So we are planning strategies to make our broader school community aware of our responsibility to keep each other safe. Some of these include mascots such as these to spread safety messages, particularly to our younger Morris students, and flyers along the lines of these that can be distributed to all friends' families to remind them of basic road safety around our school. Our first step of today's road safety initiatives is a road safety panel, and we would like to thank our presenters who have generously given up their time to be with us today. There are many of us here who have been affected by road accidents and trauma. And as a warning, some of you may find what is said today somewhat distressing.
Okay, as we all know, young adults such as ourselves, especially us guys, are invincible. And it is this fact alone that allows road safety message after message, namely not running across Argyle Street, to fall upon deaf ears. And I can say this with confidence, as until recently these ears have included my own. I would like to be able to tell you that I have never saved myself the 5 minutes that it takes to walk across the overpass, but I cannot, as this is not true. And some of you will tell me I'm a hypocrite standing up here and saying this as I'm a serial offender. But to you, I say I'm trying to change my ways, and I call on you to do the same. What brought about this change in my attitude for myself was considering the effect that I was having on others in saving myself just 5 minutes. These people include the drivers that use Argyle Street, the teachers that hold themselves responsible for our actions, and the younger children, such as the Morrison High School students that look up to us as role models. If ensuring your own longevity is not enough to stop you from running across the road, then I call on you to consider those people before you do so. If you were making the dash across Argyle Street and happened to make a mistake, being hit by a car, how do you think the driver of the vehicle would feel? How do you think your teachers and peers would feel, knowing that they are aware of you doing this but made little effort to stop you? Younger children, whether these are high school or Morris students, look up to us as role models. How would you feel if they were to see you making the dash, try it themselves and get injured or worse? How would you feel knowing they never would have done so had they not seen you do it first? And how would you feel knowing that the pain and suffering their families and friends are going through was your doing? If you're caught running across Argyle Street in the future, the punishment will be no more severe than it has been in the past, as we believe that punishing students will not change anything. All we, as the Road Safety Taskforce, ask of you is to think of the effect that you could be having on others in saving yourself only 5 minutes. Thinking of others before acting not only applies to those who would cross the road instead of using the overpass, but also to those who would practice other unsafe behaviours on the road, such as texting and driving, drink driving, driving drowsy and speeding. It is not only you you're putting at risk, but other road users. The rules are there for others' safety and not just your own, so please do your best to obey them, if not for your sake, for theirs.
Our first speaker today will be Craig Hoey. Craig is the manager of the Road Safety Branch in the Department of State Growth.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk today. As introduced there, yes, I manage the Road Safety Branch with State Government in State Growth. Today I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the crash statistics that we have for younger people, things about being human that influence our road safety task, a bit about safe speeds and survivability in crashes, and I also want to introduce Graham. Just before I start though, look, we have a vision in road safety, and that's that no one is seriously injured or killed on Tasmanian roads. We know that's a long way away, but we're working towards that vision. In terms of some crash stats that are relevant to 16 and 18-year-olds, we can see that males are overrepresented compared to females in the crashes that are occurring. That statistic between 2011 and 2016, there were 136 serious injuries amongst that age group. What we do is combine deaths and serious injuries being admitted to hospital for more than 24 hours to get some meaningful numbers. So of the 1,700 serious casualties over that period, 136 were people aged 16 to 18, which is about 10%. So you see it's quite a high representation. We can also see that young males are particularly vulnerable on our roads, and particularly when they ride motorcycles. So perhaps if you're thinking about getting a motorcycle, perhaps you could delay that and get some more training. And that's one thing we're looking at in road safety, is to improve the training for younger guys. Now, a couple of important aspects driving sort of road safety research and how we might be able to improve the road toll. It's some basic fundamentals, and they are that our bodies are fragile. We evolved over many millions of years, I guess. Probably the worst thing that could have happened a couple of hundred years ago is we could run into a tree. Now, our bodies just can't withstand the forces that occur in a high-speed crash at 100 kilometres an hour. The other aspect is that we all make mistakes. Being human, we simply can't. We just simply can't do the same thing over and over again. We do make a mistake. So those two principles that in a high-speed crash, they're going to occur because people will make mistakes. And so what we're trying to do is develop a system approach so that when we do make a mistake, the crash doesn't lead to death or serious injury. So there's really four aspects that we're trying to look at. We're trying to improve the road system, so our roads. If you look at the middle of this highway, we have a lot of safety features going into that highway. The barrier, centreline barrier, wide edge lines, and good pull-off areas, so that when you make a mistake, you'll hit the barrier and that will prevent a head-on crash, or you might hit an audible edge line and that will bring you back onto the lane. We're also looking at safe vehicles. The improvements in airbags, ABS, traction control are all really having great impacts in improving road safety. We're also looking at road users, how we're trained, how we go about our driving task, and also as pedestrians, as cyclists, all the road users, we're trying to just improve their awareness and so they're safe. And also safe speeds. So critically, we're trying to set our speeds on our roads to the infrastructure that the road can take. So a safe speed, you might have noticed that in Liverpool Street, that's 30 kilometres an hour. And that's because that's a safe sort of speed for around pedestrian areas. So in terms of crash survivability speeds, the science tells us that a crash with a pedestrian, you're not going to survive, or you're going to be seriously injured if you're hit at 30 kilometres an hour. And that's a bit of a challenge for us because we have urban speeds at 50 kilometres an hour, and we also have school crossing zones at 40. So they're really at the edge of survivability, and it's a lot to do about people's perceptions about what sort of speeds we can set. So we're trying to drive the speed down to appropriate levels. If we can't do that, we're trying to build up the infrastructure so that people slow down or pedestrians are protected. Even in the safest car that's on the road today, if you had a head-on collision at 70 kilometres an hour or above, you're most likely going to be seriously injured or in fact die. And just in terms of some of the infrastructure solutions, if you think about roundabouts are one of the most safest features of our road system. And they do that because they slow traffic down and they change the impact angle. So that while we might have a lot of crashes at roundabouts, we have very few serious injuries and deaths at those features. Now, also I want to introduce Graham. So this is this point of that we're just simply not designed to withstand crashes at high speeds. Graham doesn't work in my office. He's a something the Transport Accident Commission in Victoria is working on. And he's designed, he's actually a life-size model, and he was designed to demonstrate what the body would look like if we'd actually evolved surviving high-speed crashes. And some of the features there, he doesn't have a neck, so he doesn't have that whiplash. He has his head's quite enormous, which is more helmet-like, yet his brain is only the same size as a human-sized brain. His chest has sort of airbags in it to withstand crashes, and he's interactive. So I encourage you to Google, if you just Google Graham TAC, I should say, you'll find Graham, and it's a very good website, and it works through all those aspects of his body that have been designed to withstand those high-speed crashes. And that might be, it might be a catalyst for discussion amongst the younger age groups. They could design their own sort of Graham as what someone would look like to be able to survive a crash or a pedestrian crash. So I encourage you to have a look at that. And just finally, we could all do something. One of the principles for us is also that we all have responsibility for road safety. So myself, teachers, and yourselves. So use infrastructure that's there to protect you, crossing at lights, pedestrian islands or overpasses, use the cycle paths with available. If you're going out at night, make a plan if you're going to be drinking. Alcohol is a high contributing factor to crashes. If you're in the learning to drive phase, really encourage you to spend as much time in supervised driving if you can stand your parents. We have 50 hours as the required, but 100 plus hours, I would strongly encourage you to do that. And finally, buy or drive the safest car you can, which has got the highest star rating. And that's probably a good way to get to drive your parents' car, because you can have a convincing argument that your survivability will be much higher in a modern 5-star car. So just thank you for that, and thank you for your opportunity, for the opportunity to speak today. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Our next speaker is Diana Warner from the Tas Ambulance Service.
So again, thanks very much for having me here and giving me the opportunity to share just a very small part of my job. So my name's Diana, and I've been a paramedic working with Ambulance Tasmania for 4 years now, and prior to this I was working as a registered nurse at the Royal Hobart Hospital Emergency Department. And yes, I've seen some terrible things, so don't let you be one of them. Prior to this job, I lived in a shell, and this was completely shattered the minute I was exposed to the carnage and devastation that I was confronted with when turning up to certain scenes of traffic crashes. We are not superheroes, we are not invincible, and one day you might find yourself in the position of one of the people in the next story I'm about to tell you if you don't take responsibility for yourself as an individual and to look out for those around you. So it was 5:27 p.m. and I was just clocking on to the start of a 14-hour night shift starting at 5:30. It was dark and it was pouring with rain, 2 factors which must be considered when driving a motor vehicle. My phone rang, and it was the State Communications Office informing me that there'd been a 2-car collision involving a possible 7 occupants combined. We were 20 minutes from the scene, and at the time we were the only ambulance crew available, and we were the closest ambulance crew to attend. En route to the scene, I had a further 3 phone calls with progressive updates. The last, that there were 2 suspected deaths among the occupants. We arrived on scene to absolute carnage. Both vehicles were unrecognisable. Glass smothered the ground and dressed all of those involved. There was blood painted over all of the occupants, and the smell of death lingered in the air. The people on scene were absolutely hysterical, and the screams of those involved will be forever burnt in my memory. It was quickly established that there were 6 occupants in the combined 2 vehicles, and on assessment we found that 2 were deceased and 2 were critical. One vehicle was occupied by a newly licensed 17-year-old male, his best friend, who was also 17, and 2 female passengers who were both 18. In the second vehicle was a 46-year-old father of 3 and his 60-year-old neighbour, who was a male. The deceased were confirmed as the 17-year-old backseat passenger in the vehicle and the father of 3 in the second vehicle. This was no accident. This was a crash, an avoidable situation which ultimately changed the lives of not only those directly involved, but the family and friends, the emergency workers who attended the scene, followed by the doctors and nurses and other allied health professionals that were awaiting the arrival of those that had survived this horrific crash. This particular crash was the result of speed, alcohol, inexperience, and being naive to the value of life and what it has to offer. The 17-year-old driver suffered severe spinal damage, but is now also living with the fact that his actions killed his best friend, stole a brother and a son from a family, as well as taking a father from 3 gorgeous children and a husband from a wife who had been his high school sweetheart. This crash to me highlights the importance of the responsibility amongst all of us. Firstly, take responsibility for your own actions. No one forces you to do anything. Yes, ultimately, we live amongst peer pressure, and at times we feel the need to impress or act cool. But at the end of the day, it's you that needs to have the maturity and the insight into knowing what's right and what's wrong, or safe and unsafe. It comes down to common sense. Don't get behind the wheel of a vehicle if you've consumed alcohol or drugs of any description. Don't get behind the wheel of a vehicle and decide to speed. Stick to the speed limit. They aren't there for their good looks. They're there in place to protect road users and to minimise harm. You have the responsibility to yourself, to your passengers, and to all other road users when driving a motor vehicle. As friends, we too have responsibility to our peers. We can help them in making wise decisions about not driving under the influence, asking them to slow down if you think they're travelling too fast. But we also have the responsibility of letting the driver be in complete control of their actions by minimising distractions within the car. We often ignore simple messages reinforced by the Road Safety Taskforce, police officers, and quite often our parents. I'm sure that if I was to ask for a show of hands as to who has driven their vehicle and answered a phone call or sent a quick text message, the vast majority would plead guilty. All I ask is that you think before you act. The weather, the road conditions, the speed, your experience, alertness and attentiveness all play such a major role when taking on the position as being a driver. As an emergency service worker, and I'm sure I can speak on behalf of doctors, nurses and the Road Safety Taskforce, we're here to help protect you. We are here to promote good decisions in an aim to prevent harm to you and those around you. If you make a silly decision, then you are the one that lives with the consequence. No one wants to be the reason someone has injured or killed a mother, father, brother, sister, friend or stranger. The change is in all of you, and I know that with consideration it can be achieved. Finally, on a personal level, I hope that the message of road safety has somewhat hit home, as I selfishly would be over the moon to never have to witness severe injury or death caused by road trauma that I did that evening. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Diana. Our next speaker is Sergeant Crowley from the Tasmanian Police.
Thank you all for having me here. I think Diana, from emergency service perspective, Diana's put it pretty much bluntly. I was going to talk about the Fatal Five. I was going to talk about the relentless and repetitive messages that we always give to people. I was going to talk about the way that police pull your parents over and give them stern talking to, or yourself if you're a driver, about the behaviour of driving. I'd like to share, probably similar to Diana, some of the things that we have to do to families that have lost their family members in road crashes. And that is, if I could take you all to us going to someone's house and knocking on a door that you don't know people, to tell their parents of the child or their brothers or their sisters or their family member that they've just lost a loved one in what is clearly an avoidable crash. These crashes don't just happen because something, just jumps out at you, and if it does, then skills and what you've learnt comes into play to avoid that collision. But death happens so quickly. Death happens, to hear people screaming from inside a car isn't a pleasurable thing to go home to my family. I've got a 12-year-old son. My 12-year-old son goes here at school, and every day that I bring him to school, I watch students run across the road. I watch them put themselves at risk. Those students suggest to themselves that the car driver is experienced enough to be able to stop or avoid hitting them. You don't know that. You don't know what the car driver can do. You don't know what other things come to play. So you need to take responsibility, and if you don't take responsibility for your own actions, no one else can do that for you. But I know as a police officer, I don't want to go to your family. I don't want to be in your world any more than I have to. And so we drive around the street, and what do? We target people that are on their mobile phone, because that's what we do. And I'm not going to apologise for it, because the amount of people that have crashes because they're too busy looking at what's on Facebook to concentrate on the road. Having a driver's licence isn't something that everyone just gets. You've got to earn the right to have a driver's licence, and where we find people that can't learn to accept that right, we'll take that licence off them so they can't drive, because that's our role, or one of our roles in society. Nothing worse than turning up to a crash, an avoidable crash, and we've now got to put ourselves at risk to try and help other people who have put themselves at their own risk. The other family that's been travelling on the road, what about their families? Think about what you could do to someone else's lives. Standing up in a coroner's court isn't the most exciting thing. In actual fact, standing in a court in any time is quite frightening. And to be accused of, driving in such a manner that's caused death can change your life forever. So all I say to you, like Diana and like the rest of us are trying to say is you know what's right and wrong. You're educated students, you're educated people. You're going to go out from this environment, and you're going to go to be leaders. You're going to be police officers, doctors, lawyers, whatever you're going to do. But you need to take some responsibility in yourself for all actions. And as I say, I drive here every day, and I watch kids put themselves at risk unnecessarily just to get across the road because they can't be bothered walking across the bridge or whatever. And that split 30 seconds of a decision could change your life forever. Thanks.
Thank you, Carl. Our final speaker for the day is Dr. Andrew Climie from the Emergency Department at the Royal Hobart Hospital.
Thanks, guys. I got thrown the hot potato yesterday to talk to you, and I prepared a 10-minute talk, and I've been told I've got 5 minutes. I have to talk really quickly. Just very briefly, can we get a show of hands? Anyone's got their P plates? Put their hand up. Keep them up. Who's got their L2s? Keep them. L1s? Right, so it's most of you. I've been working in emergency departments for about 25 years now, and I also work a day or two a week coordinating medical retrievals around Tasmania, and I was ambulance service medical officer for a number of years. My wife got home in the very early hours of this morning after being in the operating theatre with a 21-year-old who had a car crash last night with severe head injuries, so I'm surrounded by this stuff all the time. I've got 2 kids, Samantha, who finished here last year, and Alistair the year before, both on P2s, and knowing what I know, I'm always a little anxious when they go on a road trip, and I make sure they take our good car. The two kids have had the concept of situational awareness hammered into them since they were born. Now, paramedics learned when they bring me patients, I ask lots of questions about the mechanics of the crash, as you get specific injuries from certain forces and certain directions of forces that you can only exclude by doing a specific test. I'm going to today to try and teach you a few concepts to keep you alive over the next few years. I'm not trying to scare you or upset you, but I'm going to use a few really sad examples. All the victims I knew or I know their parents. All these parents are diminished and some were almost destroyed themselves. You won't understand that until you have kids of your own. No names, but Hobart's a very small place, so profuse apologies if it's someone who's related to you or you know. Car can be a fun thing to drive. It is not a toy or a plaything. It's an efficient way to get from A to B. Despite being invincible at 17 or 18, nasty things can happen to you. You're far more likely to get killed in a car crash than being eaten by a white pointer or killed by terrorists. So point number one, as you've heard from these other professionals here, we're trying to get away from the concept of a car accident. It's always a crash, as it's just about always some human error. Driving too aggressively for the conditions or your skill, being inattentive, having bored tyres, so we need to start taking responsibility. Crashes are not accidents and they can be prevented. Point number two, a bit of schooling here. A car crash is applied physics. K equals a half mv squared. Familiar to all of you? So if you double the velocity from 50 kilometres an hour in Argyle Street to 100 kilometres an hour in the end of the Brooker, the amount of energy that has to be dissipated through the car and through your body doesn't double, it increases 4 times. That's why speed kills. You survive a head-on crash or crash into a pole in a modern car in downtown Hobart. You likely won't if you hit a tree at 100, 120 kilometres an hour. So highway speed is much more dangerous, especially if the approaching cars aren't separated by barriers or dual carriageways. 2 sad cases to start. 2 boys, just a bit older than you, driving to Launceston. Oncoming larger car, drifts over the midline, head-on crash. The boy's car is severely damaged and catches on fire. Horribly, the first paramedic on the scene, someone I know very well, was the father of one of the dead boys. So lessons from this, the larger car nearly always wins and parents get damaged too. One of our fourth year medical students was driving home to Hobart at the end of the week from clinical placement in Launceston, and she was seen by people driving behind her to slowly veer off the road. She likely fell asleep at the wheel and drove straight into a tree. She was dead at the scene. If she had instead just run into a fence or a paddock, she would have survived. So physics again, it's not how fast you're going that matters, it's how fast you stop. Think of a bug hitting your windscreen. But you don't stop so fast if you weren't going so fast to start with. Another lesson, if you are tired or drunk, don't drive, especially at highway speeds. And for those of you that go to UTAS and Launceston next year, take the bus, especially at the end of a tiring week, or at least get some company to drive back with, keep you awake. It would have saved that girl's life. Case number 3, our family went to the Gold Coast for 2008 to work and couldn't take our dog. One of the nurses at my work offered to look after her in their farm near Huonville. Now, her 18-year-old daughter, who actually looked after the dog, was in year 12 here in Hobart, and she got a lift each day with a school friend. But one winter morning, even though not speeding, the friend lost control in black ice near Vince's Saddle and spun into the path of an oncoming car, which unfortunately collected them in the passenger door. And she died in our emergency department with her mum there, who was one of our nurses. This lesson, speed signs are an indication only. You have to slow down when conditions are poor, such as ice, rain, dusk, and going around corners. Lesson 2, it is much, much more dangerous to be T-boned than to have a front-end crash. So when you're driving and you're waiting to turn right across the traffic and you think you can get through the gap, think again, because if you don't, your passenger's going to collect it on the side. Which leads to case 4. There's a driver stopped on the Old Midlands Highway, patiently waiting to turn right into a side road at Baghdad. And like many of you do, he'd already turned the wheel ready to go to the right. But unfortunately, an inattentive driver rang up the back of him, and rather than shunting him forward, because the wheel was already turned, shunted him around as the truck came and collected him. He died now ED too. So the lesson, never ever turn your wheel while waiting to cross traffic. It's really important. Straight ahead. Case 5, 4 boys in a car driving on Sandy Bay Road lose control. Crash, and the son of a doctor colleague of mine was killed in Sandy Bay Road. Lesson, inattention, mucking around, distraction kills. And the statistics show that 4 teenagers in a car are much more likely to crash than if there were just 2 in the car. Case 6, more inattention. At the very end of 12 years of school, 5 years of hard university study, her career assured, finally a medical student's late to the end of exams party. So she puts on a makeup while driving up Blackmans Bay Road in the 100k zone. She drifts over the midline, hits the bigger vehicle from the other way, kills herself and injures the oncoming driver. Now, not many of you would put makeup on while you're driving, but I wonder how many of you are stupid enough to text or read messages in the car while you're driving. It's illegal for a very good reason. There is some good news. Cars are far safer now than they were when I finished school. Designed with a rigid passenger compartment and a crumple zone in front to absorb the impact. Seatbelt pretensions hold you tight, and airbags are fantastic. We used to see horrible facial injuries from particularly girls sitting in the windscreen, and they're scarred for life. Why girls rather than boys? All you drivers, I want you to show me how you drive. Put your hands up as if you're on the wheel. Just hold the wheel. Now look around at everyone, and you see the girls drive like this, the boys drive like that. So girls, you've got to, when you get home, put the seat 1 click further back, and next month do it again. You should be driving with your wrists over the top of the wheels, because when those airbags go off, they'll hit you really hard. Roads are safer too, especially divided highways. Now, choosing a car. A lot of you will be thinking about buying a car, choosing a car in the next few years. Let me tell you, it's much better to borrow your parents'. It'll be more expensive and safer than what you can afford, and really important if you're at highway speeds. The rating system, the ANCAP rating, is really misleading. It indicates how you would survive in that car driving into a tree or a pole, and that's important. But if you're a careful driver, it's more likely any crash you're in will be someone driving into you. A Barina has a better ANCAP rating than an old Land Cruiser, but I can tell you which one will come off best in a crash. So to survive being hit, and this is politically incorrect, and I'm a greenie and I shouldn't be saying it, have a heavier, higher vehicle than the other guy with lots of airbags. And don't get hit in the side. If you do, hope your parents paid for the model with the side airbags. Last case, me. I'm still alive. Years ago, coming back from a weekend paddling on the Hellier River with 4 kayaks on the roof of our old Subi, at dusk, small country road, fairly quick driver, wife and I in the back seat, suddenly a suicidal wallaby hops across the road and Brad swerves to miss it, overcorrects, loses control, and we end up well off the road in the bushes. What saved us? Pure luck. We had stopped slowly, so we walked away unhurt, though chastened. We could have rolled, which would be much worse, or we could have hit one of the trees on either side where we went. And we would have ended up as strawberry custard. Now, I could go on for hours, but there's no more time, so I'll stop. I haven't even mentioned alcohol and drugs or motorbikes, which is something that doesn't need mention. But to quickly summarise, a few little points to take home. Be mature and aware that a moving car is dangerous and not the place to party. Avoid highway travel, especially if conditions are poor. Take mum and dad's car if travelling at speed. Use your common sense. Drive to the conditions. Slow down if they're poor and at dusk when there's animals about. If an animal runs out in front of you, brake hard, but keep the wheels dead straight until you've slowed right down. Better the possum gets squashed than you get killed. Drive with a safe posture, not too close to the steering wheel. Your parents will come and get you. They might whinge, but they do not want you to drive if you've been drinking. Either that or hit them for a taxi fare. Don't let your friends drive if they've been drinking. Keep the front wheels straight when waiting to turn across traffic. Of course, always use a seatbelt and be especially controlled with mobile phones when driving. Thanks very much.
So thank you, Andrew. So many of you won't be aware, but the school is actually working on a master plan document, so a plan of action for the coming 10 years. It investigates making improvements to facilities and a traffic impact study, which has been undertaken to assess the strategic changes to the two campuses. It will provide recommendations in regard to parking, access provision, drop-off, pick-up, sustainable transport, road safety and servicing provision. A traffic engineer has been employed to outline the existing situation with regards to traffic flow and includes information relating to the surrounding road network, accident history, school hours, student and staff numbers, public transport services, existing car parking, drop-off and pick-up facilities. It is aiming to reduce delays and congestion and improve safety to pedestrians, drivers, passengers and cyclists. But as we have mentioned in our workshop meetings, there needs to be a cultural change in the behaviour of some members of our community who currently work against the already installed safety elements around the school. As members of the road safety group, we've invited our compliance and risk managers from Friends and to be members of our group, and we hope that they will have some input into the traffic management and safety issues as they prepare policy around the school. Hopefully everyone here has taken some serious messages from these guys, so can we please thank them once again.